Okay, we're recording. Thanks, everybody, and Happy New Year. This is the Old Lyme Affordable Housing Commission regular meeting, Wednesday, January 19th, 2022. Again, Happy New Year. Thanks, everybody, for joining. We have a pretty packed agenda tonight. I'm going to try and move us through it so we're out of here at a reasonable time. But we do have a lot going on and a fair amount coming up over the next few weeks. So I'll just run through the agenda briefly. There was some appointment activity. We had mentioned at the last meeting in 2021 that we might go for election of officers here. I did some polling and around what the practice is on other commissions, and generally most boards and commissions elect their officers in the first meeting in January in sync with the appointment cycle. So we'll do that tonight. We have some housekeeping to do. We have minutes from December, the tandem meetings we had there. Under updates, we've had activity on Mcculloch option. We're getting an update on potential Arpa proposal, and a fair amount of activity on the regional housing plan and our local. Put PA Public Act 2129 on the agenda with focus on the accessory dwelling unit provisions. That's hitting the agenda of zoning because of some of the provisions in that legislation. It'll show up at planning, and eventually it'll show up at the Board of Selectmen. And I think this is an area where, particularly since accessory dwelling units are showing up as a pillar of our affordable housing strategy, we're going to want to be informed on this and weigh in on how we think that should proceed. And then we'll go through the two plans. I'm sorry. Then I got other business, no correspondence so far. We'll check on that. We'll look at the calendar, which again is going to be busy over the next several weeks. And this is a regular meeting, so we'll have public comment. So before I jump into the second agenda item, since I've already called to order, is any modifications to the agenda that anyone would like to propose? This is a regular meeting, so we can modify the agenda through motion and vote. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item 2, which is election of officers. I'll preface that by saying that the Board of Selectmen met yesterday and went through a round of appointments. For us, we had 2 folks who had their terms expiring in January of this year. One was Bill Belluzzi, and Bill was reappointed yesterday and will be joining us for 3 years going forward. George was also up for appointment, and George opted to pass on being reappointed. And I just want to take a minute and thank George very much for his diligence and his thoughtful approach to everything we've done. And wish you well, George, and hope we see you at upcoming meetings as a member of the public. That leaves us with 2 alternate openings. I understand from Town Hall that there are a couple of applicants, but we're going to go out and look and see who's interested. And I think we want to make some thoughtful appointments to the commission, especially given the amount of work that's going to be coming up this year as we deliver the 830J plan, and then the work really starts when we need to implement the plan, plus all the other stuff we have going on. So that's the state of appointments. What I'll do now is just pause for a minute for discussion before we get into elections. I would suggest that we replace the officers, or we stand for elections on the chairman and the vice chairman. I think we've done okay without a secretary. I don't feel the need to create a secretary post at this time, but I'm open to input on that. I'll preface by saying I am willing to stand for re-election as chairman, but I would be very open if anyone else is interested in the job. And with that, I'll pause, and I guess I'll go to Jen first, and then we can go around and before we get to the actual election part.
Yeah, sure. And I'd also like to thank George. I think you've had a lot of insightful input to this based on your experience up there in Stonington and generally in the industry. So thank you for that. And yeah, definitely hope you will follow us along as you go and still feel free to provide input to the commission. So thanks. Do I understand it correctly that there are the two openings are for alternates? Okay.
Yes, both alternates.
Okay, that's great. So I just wanted to clarify that. And no, I don't have anything else to add.
Bill?
I too want to thank you, George. Sorry to see you go. I think you have a lot to offer us, but hopefully that will continue. And I guess my only then is Amy not continuing, or did we still need an alternate?
Amy's term has not expired, so Amy's staying on.
Okay, so we had never filled there was one more alternate.
No, we already had one opening for an alternate, so now we have two.
All right, now I understand that. And I guess I don't know if now is the time, but since you've thrown your hat into the ring, I would like to say that I thank you for your leadership and would be excited to see that continue.
Thanks, Bill. We'll move to nominations in a bit. John?
George, thank you for being part of it and wish you well. And I too would agree with Michael. Very happy with your leadership, and if you're so willing, we'd be happy to have you continue.
Thank you, John. Karen?
Well, welcome back, Bill. I didn't know you were on the verge. So glad they re-upped you. George, I never even really spoke to you, COVID. We sat next to each other a couple times, but that was it. So best of luck to you. And I'm sorry that you're not going to stay on with us because like Jen said, I think you had a wealth of information that you could share with us. In terms of leadership, yeah, I'm all behind Michael. I have no issues. He's doing an amazing job and I absolutely do not want the job. And then I was just curious if I could ask a question about we do have people that are interested in being alternates or we don't. Do we have people that have volunteered or where are we at?
I found out yesterday that there are apparently 2 volunteer applications in, and I don't know if that's all I know at this point.
We don't decide that, right? It's something the Board of Selectmen. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood. Okay, got it. That's all I got. Thanks.
George?
Well, I'll kind of echo what Bill said, that I agree that we're under good leadership here. Why fix something that ain't broke? So maybe my last act should be to second the nomination for you to continue. I do think that the committee is in excellent hands with all of the people that are serving right now, and I'm sure that you'll probably get some fine recruits to come in and help you as you progress. And my confidence is in everybody who's served on this committee with me. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Okay, with that then, I will we'll move to the election part, and I will open the floor for actually before we start. So voting on this will be myself, Bill, John, Jen, and Karen. George, you're in an alternate spot, so and we have full attendance from the regular. So those will be the 5 regular members will be participating in the nomination and voting on this one. So with that, I will open the floor for nominations for chairman.
I nominate you, Michael.
Seconded.
Any other nominations? Going once? No? Okay. Hearing none, I will close the nominations and put it to a vote. All in favor of electing Michael Fogliano as chairman,
Aye.
signify by saying aye.
All right.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. I will
Thank you.
Thank
try and
you.
earn your confidence, and thank you very much for the kind words and the support. Okay, moving on. Vice Chair, I will open the floor for nominations for Vice Chairman.
Can we nominate Jen?
Yes, you can.
Second.
Okay, that's Karen and Bill. Any other nominations for Vice Chairman? Okay, hearing none, go to the vote. All in favor of Jen Miller being elected as Vice Chairman of the Commission, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Very good. It's unanimous. Welcome back, Jen. And thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you guys for everything. Team
And I'll
effort.
just say, Jen has been a super thought partner, and I'm thank you, Jen, for staying on. Okay. Continuing on the agenda, we'll go to approval of minutes. So the first would be the special meeting from December 15th, 2021. For discussion purposes, I'll look for a motion to accept the minutes.
I move to approve or accept the minutes of
I second
December.
it.
And John. Okay, discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of approving the minutes of December for the special meeting of December 15th, 2021, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the regular meeting, also from December 15th, 2021. Long file here. Again, for discussion purposes, so look for a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Motion.
Is that you, Karen?
Yes.
I second.
And John, thank you. Discussion? There's a typo in there that I found, but nothing material, so. Okay. Hearing none. All in favor of approving the minutes for the regular meeting of December 15th, 2021, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Good. Done. All right. We're getting good at this. Thank you. Okay, updates. We'll start with the Mcculloch family open space option. Don't have a lot to report on that one. When we signed off in 2021, we had successful meetings with the leadership of the Open Space Commission, and also I had attended the December meeting of the full Open Space Commission, and essentially everyone's on board with the proposed approach that would have the town retain ownership of the two building envelopes, that two affordable units would be built on those envelopes under the direction of a town building committee, and that the land would be leased to the eventual owners of those 2 units. They'd be 2 qualified units of affordable housing, that the land would be leased by the town to the eventual owners of those 2 qualified buyers, the qualified owners of those 2 units, and the revenue from the lease would be used to recover over time the original purchase price of the 2 envelopes and be directed to the open space acquisition fund to replenish that. So that's where we left it in 2021. People were pretty scarce during the holidays. I did have an opportunity to talk to Tim this week just to run it by him. And basically Tim's on board, at least in concept. So things continue to look like they're moving forward. The next step is going to be to meet with the Planning Commission, Harold, with the leader of the Finance Board and the Board of Selectmen, along with us, just to get into some of the details on how that approach would play out, and get the input from those key stakeholders on how the actual structure should work. And then we'll use that to come up with a formal proposal that can be adopted by the Board of Selectmen. And assuming that all keeps on track the way things have been up to now, then we should be in a position to convene a building committee. Thinking on the building committee is that would be a town level building committee. I think that the building committee is going to need some experienced leadership on it. Hi, Amy. I just saw you joined. Happy New Year.
Hi, Amy.
But we'll get this in front of the key stakeholders, Board of Selectmen, of course, and the Planning and Finance, along with us in open space, and see where it goes. But no immediate action right now. Where it sits is we're trying to put this meeting together with the key stakeholders, and we'll keep you posted on what that looks like. Any discussion, questions?
Michael, it's Jen. Does that have to be a public thing, or is that just something that we're just going to take up? Like, I can't imagine like the entire finance, entire planning, entire Board of Selectmen would meet. It would just be representatives like yourself and probably all 3 selectmen, but yourself, the 3 selectmen, and just representatives from the other groups, or how does that work as far as?
Yeah, I expect it'll be representatives from the other groups. I don't know. We'll have to check with the experts on this, but if 2 members of the Board of Selectmen are there, it could trigger a public meeting.
Right.
But we'll do what we need to do.
Okay.
And if that's the case, maybe I don't know. I guess it could happen under the auspices of a regular Board of Selectmen meeting, as just as an agenda item.
Right. Yeah. So we just have the reps from the other groups go to the selectmen meeting and then have the conversation there. Yeah. Okay. How well thought out? I mean, I know you've thought it out well, and I know we've talked about it a lot. As far as like playing out the approach, how well established do you think that is? So is it ready for prime time as far as here's option A or option B, or do we need to do some sort of background work on the financials with that?
Yeah, I think from a high level, everyone who's discussed it is on board. So just the overall strategy that we've been talking about with the town retaining the land, the 2 qualified units being built on the envelopes, directed by a town level building committee. What we need to get into is some vetting of the revenue stream, I think, and how that would be directed. Signs are good that based on informal conversations that we can resolve the question about the road, but that's a significant item. So we'll want to get the Planning Commission, make sure that we're good there. The issue of the umbilicals, the frontage, we need to make sure that is covered because of it's going to be affordable housing. So
Yeah, so I
another,
think
to
I
the
think what
second level of detail.
Yeah, so I think what I'm saying, we need to get to the next level, I think, because I mean, now that we have conceptual agreement from all the people that you've informally talked with, I think that now we need to sort of show up with some more, solid information around what it's going to take.
Yeah, and I think that's there, Jen. It's just a matter of we're making that level of detail is making some presumptions about where finances take and planning's take on this, and we just need to, before we lock in. So we have a proposal before we actually lock in on a fully baked proposal that we would bring to the Board of Selectmen to approve and act on. We want to get those other stakeholders' input.
Okay. And so far we have open space and Board of Selectmen, but not yet planning and finance.
Right. Planning informally, but not in a concrete way. So we just want to harden that up, and then and that'll put us in the position actually to convene a building committee and get to work.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think, while I know that the devil is always in the details, it would seem to me that you would look for a conceptual agreement first, and perhaps even in bringing it to the Board of Selectmen, maybe it is a two-step process, because I would imagine that the details, would have to be worked out by probably by the lawyer, and all, a lot of pieces there. And I think we just want to make sure that conceptually, the idea that this is able to be paid over time, and so keep it being affordable, would be the final outcome.
Yep. And I'm also, I'm conscious that even though we've put a lot of thought into this, we might not have thought of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anything else on that? I will keep everyone posted on the timing for this next step. But again, so far so good, and we did make some incremental progress since the last time we met in the conversation with Tim. So that's good news. Karen, if you were trying to speak, I think you're muted. Yep.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
You have to tell me again. I'm sorry. I got a work call. I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's okay. I saw you speak, and I just wanted to make sure you were.
No,
you
I was
trying to
I was multitasking. You caught me. Sorry.
No, not being caught at all. We're meeting in very close to business hours, and I appreciate you're being able to join us, Karen. So don't think twice.
Okay.
Okay. So if there's no more on that, the next update is on the Arpa proposal. So we're still basically in the starting blocks on this. I have one bit of information to share, and I'm going to turn it over to Jen for some thinking. As you know, the Arpa committee has been meeting. They did this survey and about priorities, and I learned that unfortunately, the opinion survey about directing ARPA funding towards affordable housing didn't fare particularly well among the other opportunities out there, which means we have some work to do. And that's understandable given that there was nothing really concrete for people. It was very conceptual for people to say, yeah, affordable housing, since there wasn't any specific proposal to put on the table.
Was there something that was particularly popular? Why, everyone, do you know?
Sewers infrastructure was pretty popular.
Okay.
I think some business relief was in there, which makes sense. So the stuff that was more close up and concrete, I think, was understandably. I'm taking it as a signal that we have some work to do in both general awareness and having opportunities on the table for funding when it's available. So again, not surprised or particularly disappointed, but it does, at least for me, underscore that we have some work to do on multiple levels. But with that, Jen, I know you have some thoughts on this.
So I'll say it's not surprising at all. I mean, so even in Norwich, if you ask them, would you put affordable housing over any other social program or economic program, it would be still down at the bottom. So it's not surprising, but and I think in a town like Old Lyme and Lyme, that basically it almost always will fall to the bottom because of like what you just said. We haven't communicated well what our definition of affordable housing is and what that looks like to the community. And once we start explaining that in our communications plan a little bit better, my expectations would be that people would say like, oh, okay, well, it's not Section 8 housing, which is immediately what everybody thinks of when you talk about affordable housing around here. So I think that that's one thing. We need to build that information feedback into our communications plan, which we are. And then the second thing is in the renovation angle, or the solving the blight problem, which we have a little bit of in the town that we've all talked about, that perhaps that's not an angle that people are thinking right now. I think they're just thinking multiplex development with 200 people coming in, of which only 100 or only which 30 have to be or 60 have to be affordable. And that's going to put a strain on our schools and on our roads and on our fire departments and things like that. So I think the more we can show people the different types of affordability and the different types of, opportunities that there are, from the range of 30% of whatever your income is all the way up to 80% of AMI, which is a very high number in Old Lyme, that if we start thinking about it in a different way. But what Norwich did was to get certain properties off of their city tax rolls, which they were stuck with as far as people not paying their taxes and vacating their properties, was, as we've discussed before, was they turned to get some renovation help for those houses so that they can then sell them and get them off of the city tax rolls. And so I don't know what the situation is necessarily with several of the properties that have been identified around town that have just been sitting there, but perhaps that's more of a deeper dive we can take into some of those known properties. And then also there's probably opportunities that we know of, that we have friends and or know people who that the house with the tarp over it that's been there for over 2 years, things like that maybe we can do, or if it's allowable, we could do some reach out to agencies that would help us with that, as far as identifying people that need help. So there's a couple of things that we could do that are more concrete proposals, rather than just saying check the box if you want more affordable housing in Old Lyme. Like, really almost nobody would ever check that box, really, with the limited understanding that they have. So I'm not surprised, but I think there's still an opportunity to tap into some of that ARPA money for Old Lyme. And I think maybe if we just have like a little subcommittee or something like that, we could do some reach out to people who will help us identify those people in those homes in need, and help them retain their homes in a safe, affordable manner.
So Jen, what do you see as next steps? I did do a little digging, and as you might remember, I think it was back in 2018, 2017, there was a blight committee that had come up with a proposed ordinance that didn't make it. So there weren't a lot of document archives on that, but I just went back and probed some of the people who were around and engaged in that, and I have not been able to identify that there was any list of potential
That was done.
Of potential opportunities that we could draw on. So we basically, I think, have to start from scratch. So with that in mind, to get to that more concrete.
So I think that,
what's next?
Yeah, I think that one of the opportunities we have is, and I'm going to forget her name totally, it's not Amanda, but the person who works with the senior center and Lyme Town Center, and she also works with the Alice group, And so I think that she would be able to provide us more of at least a starting point for potentially identifying some of those issues. My problem is I'm not sure if we want to target necessarily certain homes, certain people, certain things we think we don't like to look at, but maybe they're fine with it. You know what I mean? So I don't know how to get around that. How do you get your foot in the door, so to speak, and to being able to offer help? But we need to come at it from two prongs. We don't want to set expectations that we're going to be able to help everybody. And so we need to make sure that the ARPA committee understands, you know, what we're looking for as far as what's the ask from them, and are we maybe going to be able to get that ask from them. But at the same time, we can work with those people who are involved with Alice and some of the social welfare programs around town to see what the need is, and then we can kind of come to a, you know, like, what could we offer to help as far as pushing the ARPA committee to allocate some funding for these particular purposes.
As you were talking, I had two thoughts that led to questions. So one is, if there were I'm not aware of any, but if there were any town-owned properties that are in the same situation that Norwich had, that would be low-hanging fruit. And I guess we could just go probably to the tax folks in town and ask about that. That's public information. I'm sensitive to what you raised, Jen, which would be the sort of the privacy aspects of you know, seeking some of these opportunities. So if we had public ones, that would make it easier. And again, as you were saying that, I was thinking, well, maybe one way to do this would be to advertise that there might be an opportunity and ask either individuals or businesses to self-identify as someone who would be interested in participating. So kind of define the parameters of what a program might look like, and then invite people to apply for it.
Yeah, and these would probably, in my mind, they'd probably all be quick hits, you know, so something about like this, like a safety issue, like my friend had when, so just give you a quick example. Last year, he fell out of his chair, couldn't get up off the floor. He is diabetic and neuropathy in his feet, and called his sister. Her sister was busy somewhere else out of state, so she called 911. There was like 911, then there was the fire trucks, then there was the ambulance, then there was David Roberge, who came in because there was no fire safety protection, there was no heat in the house, there was no this, there was a hole in front of his toilet, so you could see the actual crawl space underneath, you know, where his feet would normally go in front of the toilet. It was a crap show. So so they basically kicked him out of his house until he made the necessary repairs, which he was unable to do, you know, so all of his friends kind of chipped in. But, you know, situations like that, like, you don't know what we're up, you know, we don't know what's out there until somebody lets you know. So, so I think there are people out there that know, but there are plenty of people who don't want to tell anybody that they need help. And that's where maybe some of the social agencies come in that might be better fit. Like, I don't want to approach somebody and just knock on their door and say, like, hey, you need help. But I think some of the social agencies out there probably know better than we do who needs, you know, maybe some outreach.
So when you were speaking before, Michael, you said something particular was a matter of public record, and I didn't hear what you said, what that was.
If there were town-owned properties.
So if
town-owned properties.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So if the city is taking because of lack,
I guess, not paying taxes, right?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. So yeah, I mean, we
Norwich.
don't have access. It's not public record. Like if taxes are in arrears for a period of time, is that public record?
Yes.
If they're in arrears. So
Yes.
I think, and then,
Still be a record of a tax sale.
excuse me?
Maybe somewhere way between those two lines though, John, somewhere between, you know, your timeline, your taxes and your foreclosed is a neat area.
Right. Right.
Sure.
In between, like they don't foreclose on you the minute you don't pay taxes, right? But so, and in finding out, like, I'm trying to like work backwards here a little bit in my own mind. We would be looking to see one thing we might be looking to see is if in ARPA funds, there could be some use for helping rehabilitate certain properties that were, in need, acutely in need. What you just described, Jen, if would be an example where there's actual physical repairs that are needed. So if we were to be able to, is it that we would like to get into that conversation in trying to steer some money to influence that there would be a need for some money, that yes, it would be under the umbrella of affordable housing, but to help folks specifically rehabilitate houses in Norwich. It was a fully kind of a public program, I guess, to that involved habitat, I guess, right? So is that what our intention would be? To try to see if we could, on a small scale, maybe try to get some funds, or even see that there's a need, perhaps on an ongoing basis, or something like that.
Can somebody wrap this around for me though? I'm not really sure how this relates to our commission though.
Right. So I think that there's an idea, and Habitat does this as well, but there's an idea out there that part of the commission's responsibility is not just buying properties and or buying lots and putting up houses and sending them off to the building committee to handle those on a project by project basis, but creating a more holistic approach to affordable housing throughout the town of Old Lyme that's sustainable. And one of the ways that you could might start to think about that is, as Bill said, maybe using some of the ARPA money because it's there, so I'm not sure if they've already got committed $2 million to other projects, but because we have an opportunity to start with that, maybe that gives us a little seed money to start to gather up an angle of affordable housing in our plan, which might be keeping people in their homes and keeping them safe where they are with heat and air conditioning or whatever, non-leaky roofs and stuff and solid floors. I think that a part of that might help, create the impression that we're not building affordable housing. We're not building apartment complexes all over Old Lyme. We're not doing all these things per se, but an angle of affordable housing and affordability is being able to have people make a choice between staying in their home or fixing their home and doing normal repairs and maintenance that they right now just throw a tarp over and ignore for years, versus being in a safe environment in their homes. So, they're really literally, some people one step away from being, in a Section 8 housing because they can't afford to take care of their houses.
So, but how does that get us closer to what, this 10%? How does it get us closer to where we need to be? How does that?
Good question, Karen. So
Yeah.
here's my take on that. I think the cleanest, simplest path to that, I think, Karen, is like what Norwich is doing, where they have properties that they own. And because ARPA funding can be used for redevelopment, but not new development,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to redevelop and repurpose those properties as qualified units.
That I follow completely. I just didn't follow where.
I think it starts to get gray as you go into more repair. So I don't know if there would be an opportunity to have, as part of that program, that coming out of it, the property would have a restriction that would make it qualified affordable.
Well, that's what I feel like we need to do to close the loop.
We would have to talk about that. But yeah, so I think, as again, the cleanest one is to take a property that's already vacant and owned by the town and repurpose it.
I agree.
And then it kind of gets squishier from there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think, Karen, you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm not, in this scenario, you're not trying to justify any kind of 830J, JG, whatever programs. This is more just about keeping people who can't afford their homes in their homes and making them safe. So,
And I don't think it's not valuable, and I don't think it's not noble, but I don't think it's necessarily in our purview, in our sphere, because it doesn't get us where we need to be. It doesn't get us we don't get to check that box that we need to check.
we're never going to get to be 830J.
Well, right, but that
We're all-
doesn't mean that we're going to start, gardening. We're not going to be doing those sorts of things. I mean, there's social services, and then there's affordable housing. And yes, I know they rub shoulders together, but they're not the same.
Yeah. And there's not that, it's not excluding the potential that these things could be written into those ways. So, so a lot of habitats, our habitat does not, but a lot of habitats have repair and maintenance programs that they run. So they get state and federal funding to do just that, repairs and maintenance, to keep people in their homes and to keep them safe. But I know that that's not necessarily our remit, is to keep them in their homes, but there could be an angle. Let's just say that we do some extent of repairs or whatever, and then the house does qualify as an ADU or as part of something that we can count, if you will. But I was not thinking necessarily of this
that would be a
angle
deed
of
change, correct?
counting anything. I'm sorry, John.
I said that would be a deed change. In other words, because the way that we get our units, it's going to be some sort of a deed. In other words, if we came in, like, obviously, I'm not talking about houses that the town owns or are in tax jeopardy. Those would be very low hanging fruit if, people that, if we could approach the town for those. But the things of fixing somebody's house, like, if we have money to pay for that, would be a deed change? In other words, where it is now deeded in an affordable property?
Yeah. So in the habitat world right now, they don't do a deed change. It's just basically pro bono support for the community.
Completely different than we're affordable housing, and we have our certain charge and what we're looking to try to do.
Correct.
And I'm saying it's great and noble, to help everybody, but the question is, if we procure funds and then it goes to that kind of, there's got to be, one more, will it be a deed change, and how does the whole thing wrap out?
But
there's
yeah,
a little more.
Yeah, and just to, you're perfectly correct. So it's a long shot, if you will, on that angle. But as a remit on the whole thing, what I was sort of targeting was two different things. One is get our numbers up for the sake of getting our numbers up and doing good things for the town and making it more affordable. But also any repairs and maintenance that are put into the community, and this might start just more of a get the ball rolling kind of thing, that this is what the community of Old Lyme does. We help our neighbors, and this is how we can contribute to helping Old Lyme, have more affordable housing. So it's just a different angle. I don't know that it's not in our mission statement to do that. If people can't afford to fix their houses, so they then get kicked out, and it goes downhill from there. So you know what I mean? It's just you just got to play it out a little bit longer than just looking at, okay, convert this garage to an ADU, and now we've deeded it for 10 years. So we can count it. So
No, Jeff, I'm not saying that. Like, for instance, I've been involved with Christmas in April, and a number of different things where, we've gone and, I've worked with different habitats and different people on different projects, and that's sort of their lane, which is not our lane. The idea of, how does it become our lane? That's my question. It becomes very murky.
Yeah, that's where I was thinking that if we had a little bit of seed money, we could kind of start it to be something that the town rallies around. But as far as that whole barn raising type atmosphere that we were talking about earlier in last year.
I'm very much all over the barn raising, but the question is, our charge is affordable housing. So how do we? I'm just saying, what are the mechanics of it, or is it another committee, or just because we have specific charges and things that we've put forth? And I'm not sure. I'm just spitballing here. I'm all
We could
for
be
it.
jumping too far ahead, but I see it as part and parcel of it.
So here in this go by, let me just interject a suggestion here. So when when I consider the conversation we're having now, which is a really good one, and then we look at the nascent opportunity, which is a limited duration in time and dollars ARPA program. So this is a one-shot opportunity to potentially get some funding. It's not going to be a game-changing amount of funding. I don't think we'd get. I mean, the maximum the town is getting about 2 million, so we're going to get a fraction of that at best.
Good.
So looking at this through a practical lens, it's unlikely that we're going to be able to do more than one, maybe two, but I think it would be a stretch to even get funding for one project like this. So maybe a way to start on this is to at least find out if one of those simple cases that would be low-hanging fruit, like a town-owned property or something that's obviously vacant, that's already been identified as something that would be for redevelopment, as ideally vacant, and then see if there's an opportunity for essentially one-shot, quick hit to do a relatively clean redevelopment and conversion of that to a qualified unit. And then I don't know, maybe it's out there.
If there is one out there, yeah.
Yeah, but at least maybe
should be able to find that out.
a first step would be to see if that exists. If we're fortunate enough to find one of those and do it, that could be kind of a case study for if we wanted to look at extending that process into other sources of funding and maybe a longer term. But again, since the scope of good discussion on what the scope and the remit for the commission is, and that's intersected with what the scope and the mission for ARPA is. And between them, it's a pretty tight focus. So maybe as a first step, we just start out within that relatively small circle of focus on an existing property that's pretty much ready to go, and then take it from there. But I'll
Yeah.
reopen now.
I mean, that's totally
think-
logical.
Yeah, why I was starting to raise the question was I was uncertain as to where we were going with everything. I agree with everything that's been said about the value and also what's our purview. And, if we can find what Michael just said, if we would put some energy into that, because I would assume at some point, if we're to get any funds, we have to make some sort of a case for them. They did not come out of the survey, as we're not surprised that they didn't, because, I'll get to that in a minute. But so if we were to see if we could find any properties, and then use the approach, even if it's for one property, that Norwich used for that property, and maybe that's the basis of what we start with ARPA, with ARPA funds, depending on, what we find and if we find something. So I think that's probably the safest and the cleanest way to approach this. That could be on the scale of a beginning kind of use of something for ARPA. And I guess the only other comment while I'm talking is that I wanted to make was that, I don't think at all we're surprised that affordable housing is not what people are clamoring for. I think our biggest hurdle as a commission, in the next months, in terms of our education and outreach, and with the help of River Cobb, is to move people, perhaps, or enough people, from we don't want that, whatever they think that is, in our town, to that seems like something that's reasonable. To get it to the point where we think that's a priority, there are people in our town that feel affordable housing is something that is very, very important to them. But I would venture to say that's a small minority of people. I think then there's a group of people that think it's a laudable goal, and then there's a considerable group of people that are either against it or don't know enough about it, or maybe against it because they don't know enough about it. I think that we're going to have to move in we're going to have to move incrementally in terms of changing people's mindset.
Well said.
And Bill, I agree. I don't think, I have no expectation that the ARPA committee is going to come to us and say, we'd like to give you some money and see what you can do with it. We're going to have to come up with a proposal and a budget and request it.
Absolutely.
Frame for this.
For one interesting thing, I just went to the judicial website. There are no foreclosures in the town of Old Lyme right now, and that would include tax ones too. So we should probably check with the tax office to see if there's any that are in possible jeopardy or whatever, or already town owned.
What's the window for this proposal? Like, what's our timeline?
It's planned out, I think, over 2 years, Karen, if I remember correctly, and there's going to be 2 tranches of funding. To their credit, I think the ARPA committee is moving very deliberately and taking a lot of input. So, well, I don't think any ships are going to sail immediately. It is time bound by, I think we need certainly within this year to come up with, if we're going to come up with something, we need to do it over the next several months, I would say. If we expect to get any funding, have any funding left to even apply for.
Since this was all under ARPA proposal, that's the what we're on right now. And well, there's 2 years, I guess, to have the money dispersed. I mean, I do imagine, and as deliberate as they can be, I think that there are some definites that will get good attention for the money. Is there any chance to use any of the ARPA funds for the Mcculloch property?
No, because
okay, right. That's new construction. That's not covered, right? Okay.
Good question, though.
What about the road? No, where the other homes, those are our few affordable housing. Anything for that?
I'm not sure that I don't know if there is any funding needed for the road at this point.
Okay.
But again, great questions. So just to not necessarily bring this to closure, but to bring it to something actionable. So as a next step, we'll try and identify something that's in a similar category that Norwich has been able to take advantage of. John's real-time research notwithstanding, we'll go and see if there's something that we don't know about and that's not out on the obvious public record. So how do you want to carry that forward? Jen, do you want to stay on point for this? And you're muted. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, thank you. Yeah, I can take a run at it and go down to town hall tomorrow. Just take a look, see, and have a conversation with them and see what's on the tax books like that, just to confirm what John's found out. And then maybe I'll draft up a little something about what might be doable, and we can I'll send it out to everybody.
Sounds good.
And then at this time, we're gonna just put aside sort of the other effort around working with different agencies to identify the need.
But for the long term, I wouldn't want to lose that thinking.
Yeah, until we get this solved, we'll do one thing at a time. Yep.
It also, having that kind of awareness and understanding also feeds back into our strategy and planning, because it gives us a sense of what the demand is. So it's it's not a bad thing to up our awareness of.
Michael, can I just make one comment, kind of bringing together some of what Jen and Karen were talking about from polar opposites? Is, most people I think our committee is a committee that's going to come up with some building plans to attract people to come to our town. That affordable housing is a need that isn't a need for our residents. And I've been a long advocate for saying, well, take a look around. Is the mechanic at All Pro able to buy a house in Old Lyme and afford it? And I think if we switch the question from, do you support affordable housing, to would you be open to finding ways of helping employees of some of our best businesses in town keep their employees, especially, when employees are walking away at record rates and people are having a hard time attracting good employees. Affordability of housing could be a very important key issue for some of our businesses in town to say, hey, I got people coming in, they're commuting 10, 15, 20 miles to get to Old Lyme to work here. Might we think of it as an opportunity to keep these employees local, support them? And to Jen's point, maybe there are people who are already here in town who may need a helping hand. I'm not sure that you can turn around a house and create it into an affordable housing unit for our purposes of measurement. But if you talk in those terms to the people in town, I think you create a different kind of conversation than saying we want to build some affordable housing or create some affordable housing. It makes it more about supporting a paraprofessional at the high school or a mechanic at All Pro or a checkout person or assistant manager at Big Y living in town and being able to afford it.
Thanks, George. That was a good summary of some of the ideas that we've been kicking around. I think it should be a focal point of some of the communication we do. It's less about the houses and about the people.
Yeah, and I think when you make it personal like that, people begin to relate to it and say, oh, I see why you want affordable housing in town. It's a benefit to all of us. Our kids go to school with the paraprofessional who can now live in town, whose kids are going to school in town. It creates a dynamic that is different than the dynamic of thinking about people coming into town from all over. And all we're doing is creating a gateway for development. What we're trying to do is actually create a sustainable environment for affordability within town.
Exactly. Amy, I saw you trying to jump in, but I see, you're not muted now.
Yeah,
Oh,
sorry.
there you are.
No, I was just wondering, when are we supposed to get the detailed 2020 census data for Old Lyme? Because I think there may be a really interesting story in how dire the situation may be for residents of Old Lyme, and unfortunately, if it doesn't come out for some months, we're losing something. But I'll check into it and try to see. But it would just give us so much a better basis.
There would. My understanding, there has been some release of 2020 data, but it's rolling. And then on top of the data, there's these secondary and tertiary analyses that are done. And so
yeah,
I think it's not going to be on the timeline for our planning in the first half of the year is the bad news. This isn't necessarily good news, but I don't think that the 2020 census data, we're working at such a fundamental level here and such a fundamental level of need and opportunity that I think the 2020 census may help us refine some of our thinking, but I think some of the big directions that we want to take, we have what we need to at least set the direction, and then we'll refine that. We'll course correct based on some of the most current data.
Yeah, it's just that they have census tract data at some point
Yep.
would really help.
It would be.
I worked for the census last summer, and I could tell you the people in Old Lyme were hostile and would not give you any information. So,
Oops.
All right. So on that note, we'll try and see if there's any low-hanging fruit that we can pursue right now, and I'm sure this will come up again. It'll be a standing agenda item. Okay, thanks, Jen, and thanks everybody. That was a really good discussion. It surfaced some things that we're going to need to be thinking about and setting a course on, regardless of ARPA. So it triggered a very good discussion. Thank you. Okay, next up, we have the RiverCog Regional Plan. This will be a relatively quick update. As you saw in the email update I sent out, RiverCog has another public meeting that they're planning to put on January 24th, which is a week from Monday. The announcements are up. I just learned this week that the town has now scheduled our town annual business meeting on the 24th, overlapping with it, which might inhibit attendance. On the other hand, the town meeting is going to be face-to-face only, it looks like, so I'm not sure how much attendance there's going to be. But in any case, RiverCog is going to be holding another public meeting. I solicited agenda and materials for the 24th from RiverCog. They don't have that ready yet, but I'm just pulling up an email I got just earlier today. Let me look at the right email box, and I'm going to read to you what I heard from Megan, who's the project leader up there. So I'm just going to read to you from Megan's note. The agenda will generally go as follows. First, an intro and background of the project, which will be a recapitulation, I'll assume, from the first meeting. Recap of data from the intro presentation. Regional findings and recommendations. So I don't have anything concrete on what their findings and recommendations have been, but I'm going to plan to attend this and listen. Again, I'll try to get it in advance of Monday, but I don't know what to expect. And I don't think at this point, it's going to be feasible to provide input and change anything in their findings and recommendations. Though if we see anything that is running grossly counter to our thinking, I'll make sure that we get a hold of somebody and at least have that acknowledged during the presentation. But we'll do our best to try and get some content in advance. So the regional findings and recommendations, discussion of the A30J process, which should be relatively straightforward. Schedule for specific town outreach. I mentioned in my earlier email, we're up on the 15th of February for our first virtual session. And I'll get to that in the next agenda item on how we're moving forward on that. And just spoiler alert, it's going well. And then concluding remarks. So there'll be an opportunity for feedback, Q&A, I think, during this. So the message here is the meeting's happening. We have a general sense of what the flow is going to be. We don't have a sense of what the regional findings have turned out to be. And I think we're just going to have to tune in and deal with it in real time. I also don't think that this is fully, the regional plan, even on Monday, is in final form. It's going to have to go through an adoption process. And my understanding is that the adoption process will entail having the actual board of the Council of Governments adopt the regional plan. And that includes that includes the chief executive from Old Lyme, which is Tim. So we have someone who's has a seat at the table that. So again, if there's any, we have two channels on this. So one is we have direct access to the project team for the regional plan. So if we have any feedback on what we hear on Monday or what we learned before then, we have a channel for that. And I think we'll be able to exert some influence over the regional plan. For example, just to digress short, we keep saying it would be enabling if we had better options for on-site waste treatment that would help avoid the need for sewers to develop some housing with increased density. So I'm going to be looking closely to see if that's turning up in the regional recommendations for the state to accelerate their research and adoption of advanced technologies for that. I think also that I'm pretty sure this will happen. We'd like to see some rationalization of the thresholds at 830J. I haven't heard anyone from a small town think that the 10% was well thought out and usable.
Yeah.
So we'll see where it is. But if you're able to join that meeting on the 24th, please do. And then we'll have a conversation about what we hear afterwards and pull together any feedback that we want to see incorporated into the plan. And we also have, if we have thoughts on it, we can also give those to Tim as a member of the board. So we have another channel there, but I think the first best way to do it is through the project team.
Mike, was there something on the 22nd as well, the Saturday, or no? Did I get that messed up?
No, that was a different meeting, Jen. That's not happening.
Oh, it's not happening. Okay.
Yep. So the one on the 22nd was going to be the EDC sponsored meeting for the cross commission discussion. And because the outbreak is running so hot in Old Lyme, they really want to make it a face-to-face. So that's been deferred for at least a month.
Okay. Yeah, I just wrote down affordable housing. So
yeah, probably into March. But they've been trying since last, I think, April to do this, but here we are. The wheels turn slowly. Okay, back to the regional plan. So that's where we're at. Any questions, comments, thoughts? Okay, again, if you're able and if you're planning to attend the town meeting, that's great. If you're not attending the town meeting, I don't think there's going to be an option to even dial in to the town meeting. So it's at 7 o'clock on Monday. And there's an announcement up on the town website and our affordable housing page inside the town website with a registration and connection link for the Zoom aspect of it. Okay. And as always, if you think of something after we break, please don't hesitate to send it along. Okay. Tightly related topic, our 830J plan. So again, just recapping where we sit right now is we're working with RiverCog so this is about the consulting. We never did get any responses to our RFP. So we have been moving forward with RiverCog to extend their contract with their consultants to provide some customized work for Old Lyme. And at our meeting in December, we discussed that, and basically that the extension is proposed to go along 3 lines. So the first is to design and implement a second community workshop, ideally face-to-face, but if not, we'll have to go virtual. If we're not able to, we'll go virtual again. And that would be positioned in the March timeline to actually go through an advanced draft of our plan and get a last round of public input before actually moving forward with adoption. The second part would be to set up one of those story map websites like the one that Rivercog has put up as a sort of a public presentation for a plan that would be with some fairly advanced graphics and presentation materials, latest technology, and this consultant group has the technology and the experience to do that for us. And the third thing would be a more technical thing, and actually to do a development build out analysis, so we got a better quantitative handle on what our capacity was. So that's in fairly advanced form. There is a draft agreement extension that's pretty much ready to go. I haven't seen the last bit yet, but we're going to run that by Tim and make sure it's acceptable to them. And also it would need to include provisions for our grant being directed to that work, which would involve some an invoicing and payment agreement between the town of Old Lyme and Rivercog. So similar to the Mcculloch thing, we've got the framework up. We've got to hammer out a couple of the details, but it looks good for actually getting consulting resources for the 830J plan. Pulling it in closer, as part of our relationship with Rivercog and part of their funding, they have a budget item for Old Lyme to hold the first public forum, which is scheduled for February 15th, as we discussed in December. It turned out to happen. The best date was February 15th for all involved, as well as actually preparing the documents for our plan. So we're going to get some services regardless of how and where we apply our grant money from the Rivercog consultants, which is great news. I did touch base and have an initial range finding meeting with Karen Martin from SLR Consultant, who is working on our case for the first public forum on the 15th. And we've had a really good conversation, and there's some very early draft materials out. But what I wanted to go through tonight was the outline and basically the flow and the high points of what we're going to try and do at that first public meeting, and get some input on that from the full commission before we get too much farther along the line. So we've got almost 4 weeks to go. I've seen some of the stuff that SLR has for the town level data, and it was pretty impressive. And the messages there look like they're going to be, the takeaways from those data look like they're going to be very supportive of the strategy that we've been working to outline, which will also be incorporated into that public forum. So if you can look at the document that I sent out, that was just the outline, the less than one pager on the Old Lyme Affordable Housing Plan Community Workshop #1 agenda and content. So does everybody have that?
I think so.
So at a high level, our thinking is to divide the session into 2 parts. The first will be highlighting us, our commission, and we'll be doing the talking. And that would be to welcome the people, go through the objectives for the workshop, go through the general introductory stuff, the welcome material, then move on to actually introducing some of the background material in the strategy. So I'll back up a second. The approach that we're looking at taking for this is basically using deductive reasoning instead of inductive reasoning. And the way that works is, with deductive reasoning, is you state the theory of action first, and then you provide the data to support how you got there, rather than starting with the very granular data and trying to lead folks along to the same answer and to basically generate the theory of action. So what we're thinking of doing is, that slide deck, the discussion notes that we've been talking about for the last multiple meetings during our planning sessions, will be basically the kind of content we'll draw on from that. So and also the content that we have on our website. So basically describing what affordable housing is, who benefits from it, what it looks like, what the state of it is in Old Lyme, some of the history, getting into some of the forces at work in a town in Old Lyme that are influencing our strategy, land availability, the water considerations, amount of the developable land, the environmental sensitivity, some of the demographics. Amy, to your point on the census, I saw this came out back in the original RiverCog meeting, but the trend of an aging population, a decreasing population in general, and a population that's specifically decreasing in the younger age groups, along with a shift in household size to smaller numbers and a marked rise in the number of households that are occupied by one person, a single person, not an unmarried person, but one person. These are all being brought to bear, along with the market forces that have been exacerbated. So there's a story to tell of the forces at work that lead us to that conceptual strategy that we've been talking about, the Goldilocks strategy of having the onesie-twosie 30% developments being too small, the very large multifamily developments being too big, and having a sweet spot in that would be occupied by redevelopment, by small clusters, and by highly efficient low unit number clusters in multifamily, as we have on that slide. So that would basically be in the first part, to lay out the rationale, and then to talk about how we see our strategy developing. And then at that point, it would shift to the consultants who have just reams of data. The challenge there is going to be to focus it, and then make the case from the data on why why our thinking is appropriate based on the data. So, and then after that, there'll be an opportunity for an interactive feedback session. I don't know if any of you, I know, Jen, you've probably seen these from back in our corporate careers, where in real time, and actually they did this at the first meeting, for if any of you were at the first RiverCog meeting, but they can kind of do real time pulse checks on the audience, where they put up a survey question and people can respond online, and there's a real time tallying of the responses. So we'll need to do some work to craft the questions that are going to be answered then, and it gives it'll be an opportunity to get a quick pulse feedback on what was presented. It's kind of engaging for the audience and fun, and at times it actually does come up with really useful feedback that we can incorporate. And it is going to be only a virtual meeting, so we're going to be limited in sort of the conversational environment that we'll have. Then there'll be an opportunity for Q&A. It'll come back to us, and we'll talk about what the next steps are in town, and we can talk about the process and timeline as we've discussed it in our meetings, leading to the second public forum. Between now and the 15th, I think we're going to have to wrap our heads around whether we commit to having a public hearing, a formal public hearing, in addition to the second public session, so that we can put that on the calendar and present that on the 15th for our timeline.
Michael, I don't know what the criteria is for a public hearing. Is that just to get more input, even if we're not voting on something, or is the intent to actually have the town vote on whether or not they like our plan?
No, a hearing is just an opportunity for feedback. No, okay. The two options we're juggling is, one, do we want to call the second meeting, which will happen in mid-March, the public hearing, where people get to come, hear about the plan, have an opportunity to talk about it and provide feedback. A public hearing is more structured. There's a posted document, there's a legal notice, and people basically come up to the podium and provide unidirectional feedback. It's more like public comment it's not a workshop.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity for people to come up and tell you what they think, and it's kind of unidirectional. It's not a conversation. And it's a legally defined and formal process.
Okay.
And it's generally used at times when there's a public decision to be made.
Okay.
It's an opportunity to hear from the public again. It may have some redundancy. I have personally ambivalent about it. My sense is if I invoke the principle that more opportunities to hear from the public is good, then we would go with it. But I'm interested in hearing people's thoughts on that too. But so that kind of wraps up. So let me pause then and just take general feedback on this flow. And I think the content, we have pretty much all the content we need based on our discussions about the background information, the rationale, what we see as the strategy, the history and the current state of affordable housing is what it is. The forces at work it will need to articulate and put in a presentable and digestible format for the general public, but it's out there. And the data, at least what I've seen, is going to be very supportive, unto compelling to support the case we're making. So two things. In general, any comments on the outline and flow for the meeting on the 15th? And then also any thoughts you have about actually putting a public hearing on the calendar? I'd be interested in hearing that too. I'll pause here.
Just an initial thought. I think the flow is good for this meeting. I'm wondering because I don't know in the town what the general experience is with a virtual meeting. And since it's, supposed to be of a workshop nature to get the word out there. And this is kind of our first thing, really about affordable housing and, other than actionary to something else. So I'm wondering if having the third date, if there was really good participation in the first one, maybe it would be redundant, but I'm wondering, if we ought to plan for the third, and I don't know if we can, if we have to have made a definite decision. So we tell people obviously on the 15th that this is what the process is. I just would hope that if our, since it's our initial timeout, that it would be at least have sufficient public participation.
Bill, as you're talking, it struck me, there's nothing that stops us from having a third workshop in April. If the pandemic tide has receded by then, which we wouldn't have to commit to, but there's nothing that would prevent us. We don't need the consultants to do that. Once we have the materials, we can hold a public forum anytime we want. We just put it on the calendar and advertise it and have it.
Because basically we could actually be saying maybe a third workshop if needed, and maybe it's not called I forget what did we say?
Public hearing.
Public hearing.
Yeah.
Because at this point we need to get that plan adopted, done and adopted, but that's only the beginning of our work with the town, I think, right?
I agree.
So, yeah, so I think, I don't think we necessarily need to have it as a hearing, because, but we'd like to get as much positivity out of it as we could. So maybe if we just allowed for a third workshop if needed, and we could gauge that based on the participation in the first 2 times and what kind of enthusiasm we have.
That sounds good. And, you know, for the public hearing, there are processes that require a public hearing. 830J is specific in that the public hearing is optional and the plan can be adopted without a public hearing. Maybe I'll just get some input from town leadership and maybe the town council on their thoughts on whether it would be, if not required, if it would be prudent or not to do a. So good. So I'll leave that as another option, which is we don't get concrete about the public hearing right now, and we use that as more as a legal procedural step, and we'll take some advice on whether or not to include that. We can, you know, that has its own notice timeline. The timeline we have to be aware of for that is that the documents that will support the public hearing have to be publicly posted, I think 60 days in advance of the hearing. I'm sorry, 35 days in advance of the hearing. So that's why, where if we were looking at doing adoption in May, that we had targeted, if you look at that calendar that I've been keeping on that horrible spreadsheet, I'm just trying to keep track of all this stuff. That puts us at mid-March as the target to publish any documents that would be the subject of the public hearing.
Can we have a meeting that's not virtual? Can we do a workshop in person?
Yeah, I think not for the 15th.
Because
The infrastructure for this is being set up by Rivercog, and so this is the one we're getting from them.
okay.
But for the second one, I think we hold out to the last minute. And I think the only consideration, I think our plan A should be to do it in person. And the only reason why we didn't, if his conditions made it unsafe to do it for the public.
Agreed. I think the second one should be planned as in person,
Yep.
and then the fallback would be, you know, God forbid we have to take more steps back.
I'm
But
so hopeful that we don't have to, but you know, these days I think we have to have a contingency plan for if we are unable to meet in person safely, that we're able to have the second workshop anyway.
my only, sorry.
I was just going to ask a question about the March timeline. So that 35 days is 35 days from just sort of when we want to deliver the plan, but the due date is June 1st, right?
But from the hearing, Jen. So we would want to have the public hearing before we went to the adoption phase. So I think if we're targeting a public hearing for mid-April or even late April, which would give us all of May to go through the adoption process, that
Right.
puts us back to mid-March for
I
having
thought-
the draft document pretty much final form.
Well, so I'd be definitely in favor of over opportunities for the community to comment rather than limiting that. So anything we could do for the schedule, I think, as Bill alluded to just get it on our schedule and plan for a third opportunity for either that one-way feedback in a hearing or a two-way conversation. I would be in favor of that for sure. Good. And I think this is not like we're proposing a 260 unit complex, so we're not going to get like shot down and killed, whatever. But so, this is more of like, we have a thoughtful plan that we've been engaging around and we're presenting it to you and we want your input on it versus we're coming out there and we're going to, put up something on the side of a highway. So I think it would be warranted, and as I can tell you from the Board of Ed forums that I've been involved with for the last couple of years, you're going to get, we typically get 12 people, showing up out of, and this is out of every single parent in the town of a school kid has been notified, multiple times about when these meetings are. So maybe we'll get better engagement, but anything also that the consultant, Karen, might have as far as teeing up some enthusiasm around the conversation, maybe we could tap into her expertise there as well.
Thanks, Jen. Other thoughts?
Michael, I have
Okay.
a question on the Goldilocks approach, if this is a good time to jump into that. I was just curious, I understand the just right, but we're not excluding the two on the outliers though, are we?
No, that's why if you look up in the little thing above it, opportunistic versus core.
Yep, okay. I just
So
wanted to make
core
sure.
means we're going to kind of bear down on that, and that'll be the focus of our efforts. But if there's an opportunity to build a onesie twosie, we're not going to say no just because it's not in the core. We're going to do it. And similarly, if the project for a large multifamily
Happened, yeah.
plays out and is able to generate tens of units at once, we'll go with it. But the notion there is they would be just that. They'd be opportunistic and not something we'd be working hard to create opportunities to do.
Understood.
Is that
Yep, perfect.
great? Okay, so we'll provisionally keep the public hearing on the calendar, and I will check with Town Hall and see if there's any particular reason why they think we really should do that, or if there's reasons why they think it might specifically be not useful. But we'll have an opportunity to process that before we go one more time. Two other things on this. So one is we're going to have some materials coming up. Some draft materials. I've seen some really early draft stuff. It's like 70 odd pages of raw material out there. There's tons of stuff. That's being put into a format that will be a rough draft that we can at least look through. The 15th is coming up in just under 4 weeks. I could put a special meeting on our calendar. So that's the day before. Tuesday, the 15th is the day before our February commission meeting, which is on Wednesday, the 16th. So we don't have another commission meeting scheduled between now and the 15th. So I will offer to schedule a special meeting with the agenda item to go through the draft materials and the run of show for the public forum, for the community forum, and have a chance to walk through that together and tune it up. So I think my opinion is it would be useful to do that. If not, I'll work with the consultants to do that. But I would love to have everybody's head in the game on this if you are willing.
I think it's definitely necessary. Just not on February 2nd.
Okay.
The Board of Ed.
Okay, if there are no objections, then I think we'll have I'll aim for sometime in the next 10 days or so. Hopefully next week we can find something. I will send out a note tomorrow with the usual poll for availability and come up with some dates, and we'll do a special meeting, and I'll get you draft materials in advance of that. And it's been good, really good working with Karen Martin from SLR so far, and I have high expectations that this is going to go really well. So as usual, watch your email for the flurry after our meetings, looking for dates. And I had the second thing I had was again on that very dense eye chart of a spreadsheet. February 7th is a date on there, which is, or maybe February 4th. I don't have it open in front of me, but there's an issue of the Old Lyme Events magazine that gets direct mailed to the whole town coming up, and there's a deadline looming for an article in that. So I'm going to suggest that we take advantage of that. I think that our thinking has evolved to the point, and we have enough content so that we could start to get the word out more generally beyond just our website. and it would provide an opportunity to keep telling the story and sending out the key messages in various media.
Is it the article deadline is February 4th, or that's when the magazine comes out?
That's the article deadline.
Article deadline, okay. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I don't know if do other people get that and read that at home?
It gets direct mailed, so
Yeah.
I'm sure that that's also a direct to recycle for some folks, but I read it.
No, I do.
Okay. Yeah, I think it'd be useful. Would Karen be able to help us with that as well, or would we pull some of the graphics or maybe some of the information from?
Yeah, I think
then-
we might be. I think we would start with an outline. Flesh it out with some. We're going to be limited in space. We're going to have to just pick a few key things to get out there. We're not going to be able to tell the whole story.
Yeah, it's like 100 or 250 words, something like that.
Yeah. So I think it'll be relatively quick, but if we're in agreement, this is a good idea. I'll reach out to the editor and see what the process is and what the limitations are. But I don't think we're going to lack for content. It's just going to be.
Yeah, but we definitely want to advertise the February workshop.
15.
Yeah,
Yep.
meeting, and then say that, and there'll be subsequent, at least a subsequent meeting after that.
And preview some of the thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Used to call that shell on the beaches, but I don't want to use militaristic metaphors.
Do we know when the magazine actually comes out?
Yes.
After that, I don't know.
And yeah,
No,
I
I'm
can.
saying if it comes out, whether it comes out before the February 15th.
Yeah.
I'm going to say I doubt that
Okay.
if the deadline
Yeah.
isn't.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like Bill is the same thing. Whenever I read it, I was like, "Oh, that happened last month." I think it's just a quarterly publication.
I think so too. And so I wouldn't see this as being kind of in stream in a sequence of events, but it's an opportunity to get general information to inform and reinforce our thinking.
Right.
But I wouldn't
So
want to.
maybe we don't even say February 15th. Maybe we just say it's a series of opportunities.
So it's it really is a great question, Bill, because I don't see it on the critical path for our communication. It's just an opportunity to reinforce.
I'll follow up with Suzanne Thompson, who's like one of the co-editors.
Oh, is she great?
Yeah.
Thanks, Jen.
Yep.
And see what the opportunity is to include anything graphical.
Okay.
Okay. I think that got us through our updates. Okay, so it's 6:45 and we're still in early phases of the agenda. I hope you guys are able to hang in. Okay, so the next item up is PA 2129. So quick backstory on this. If you recall back in the early part of to mid part of 2021, there was a lot of activity around housing and zoning in the legislature. Desegregate Connecticut and there were other not-for-profits were working hard to incorporate some legislation into that session. There was a bill 2107 that was eventually advanced and was passed into law in the form of Public Act 2129 that has a bunch of provisions in it that were aligned roughly with a portion of the agenda, the legislative agenda advanced by Desegregate Connecticut. And in there is things like training for commissioners, some of the parking requirements for housing, and one particular area of that regards the right to create accessory dwelling units. So as of right, which means that they would be removed from being a special purpose and would basically it would streamline the application for creating ADUs to basically filing the paperwork to show you're in compliance with existing regulations, and would not be subject to hearings and some of the red tape that comes with special uses. Also in that legislation was the opportunity for towns to opt out of it by January 1st, 2023. So the way I read it is that if towns do not opt out of the accessory dwelling unit provisions of PA 2129 by January 1st of 2023, then those provisions supersede town regulations. And if they do opt out, then, or if they either opt out of it completely or replace it with something else, if they do neither of those two things, then the local regulations stay in force. So that, and then there's that third thing. So they can either opt out, they can either do nothing, in which case the provisions of PA 2129 supersede the local regulations. They can completely opt out of those provisions, in which case the local regulations stay in full force and effect, or the town can replace the ADU provisions with something else. Now, at this point, I know that zoning has this on their agenda, and they are looking at opting out. I don't know what the thinking is on that, whether there's been a decision, whether they're inclined to do it or not, but it's at least going to be on the agenda. And since ADUs look like they're going to stay as part of our core strategy for affordable housing, driven by things like the demographics of an aging population, the trend towards more and more families being single occupant, one person. ADUs, and this came up during the committee deliberations too. If Karen and John, you recall that that was surfaced as something that was could be an important part of a strategy to provide housing for the people who qualify for it. So, given our commission's charge as needing to have some expertise in legislation relevant to affordable housing, and to serve in an advisory capacity to the other boards and commissions who were affecting or being affected by such legislation, I think we need to understand this and provide an opinion to zoning. And I think planning also has to take this up, and the Board of Selectmen ultimately has to decide on this. So I don't have a lot of the arguments pro and con, but we're going to have to pay attention to those. I am aware that from looking at what's happened in other towns, that the use of accessory dwelling units as short-term rentals, Airbnbs, is a source of concern in some communities. But personally, I think we need to have the conversation, at least in the town, and not just quickly move to opt out without understanding the ramifications for affordable housing, and risk having unintended consequences and possibly throwing the baby out with the bathwater if we do that. But that's my take. So again, I asked everybody to have a look at the legislation and share your thoughts. So with that, let me just open it up for conversation.
This is Jen. I'll just say I don't think it's a bad read. I don't think I didn't get really any kind of thing that sends up huge alarm bells or anything. And I mean, the zoning commission might have other issues with it, is my first thought, because of our zoning commission's great ability to discuss things. But so I think that maybe from their perspective, they might have more of a sense of, that we're being hand strapped somehow into confined, things. But from a affordable housing perspective, I don't really get the sense that they're trying to either drive mandates or that. If the zoning is what it is, then as of right, it doesn't really make a difference. It's as of right per the zoning laws.
Yeah, my take was that having a provision for ADUs as of right is actually lowering the bar for ADUs, and is actually an enabler for that portion of our strategy. So that removing that would be an impediment. Recognizing that there may be other reasons that it's problematic for
I think
for
when
other
they
parts of the
were
community.
discussing this last year, all throughout the summer, with desegregate CT and everything, it was more around these transportation hubs, and their focus was on, being allowed to build multi-unit housing next to a train station, which that seemed to be their very big, legit, focus from the meetings I sat in on. But, and I think that most towns would say, okay, well, he's next to a train station. Who wants to live there? Let's put multifamily housing there and see who shows up, like Old Saybrook did. And everybody showed up. So, I mean, turned out to be a great thing for Old Saybrook. But, we don't have that issue. So, or opportunity, however way you look at it.
And the ADU provisions are unique in that there's that specific opt-out process just for those. So, Amy, I saw you.
Oh.
You want to say something, but you're muted.
Yeah.
Oh, no, you're not.
I'm sorry.
Oh, you're muted now. Not you weren't muted. Now you are.
Okay.
Okay, now you're
I
back.
was just saying, I have to leave quickly. Are there, what is next on the agenda?
We're going to talk about 2022 priorities.
Okay.
Won't be the last conversation. I know I was actually going to look to you because I know you have some thoughts on that. So.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay, no ships will sail. It's the first discussion about priorities. So. Okay, any thoughts on 2129?
So, it would be, I wonder if you're saying that you're hearing that the general or the buzz is from the zoning commission that they would prefer to opt out.
So just, Bill, briefly, no, I haven't heard that. I just know that it's on the agenda.
Oh,
So,
because
and given our role,
yeah,
and since ADUs are a component of our strategy, and given our explicit charge to serve an advisory capacity on matters related to affordable housing, I just think we need to have we want to have a position on this.
right. And I guess one of the things is, if we're in the process of putting our plan forward, which we are, and the plan has to be done by the 22nd, and ADUs, I mean, ADUs, of course, can be part of our plan, whether or not that they're allowed that they would be as a matter of right, as of right, or whether there are restrictions. And this is what I was having a lot of trouble with understanding, was that there are several kinds of, they can put certain restrictions in, and other things they're not allowed to restrict, even if they don't opt out. So anyway, I guess I would hate to see something kind of explosive happen with ADUs on the part of the zoning commission while we're in the middle of touting them as a viable means to move us ahead in our plan toward affordable housing.
That's consistent with my thinking. If we expect that at some point, as our planning and implementation proceeds, that we're going to make a recommendation that we should be enabling ADUs as a means to increase the accessibility of affordable housing to the community, then we probably, we'll want to at least have that be part of any conversation about 2129 in the context of an opt-out.
And I was reading, there was one place, and I'm looking to find it again, I should have marked it, where, and I couldn't tell whether they could prohibit the uses of for these to be used for something like Airbnb. I thought there was something in here, and can't find it, whether it said they could prohibit it or they couldn't. Because if you say that may be one of the major things, that people want to do this and then be bringing, different people to their homes each weekend, whatever it might be, that might be, problematic, or people might see it as problematic. And I thought I read that they could be stopped from doing that, but I don't remember. So anyway, I guess it would be nice to find out what their thinking is, because I just think that would be good for us to know, or at least what direction they're going in. That's it.
I thought this was a really hard read.
Yes, very hard.
I was like, wow, Michael, whoa. Does anybody know, to Bill's point, what was the thought process? Why is this new? What were they trying to accomplish?
Again, this is my interpretation, was that this emerged, there was a long list of items on the legislative agenda for some of the folks who were housing advocates last spring. And enabling accessory dwelling units was on that list. So basically, this is what made it through the sausage creation process. Some things made it through, some things didn't, and some things made it through, but not exactly in the form that they went in. But this is what came out.
It was driven, Karen, mostly by a consortium of educators from Yale and in particular Yale and other places. But the intent was to improve the diversity of housing in Connecticut, but while also containing the footprint around major transportation hubs, so that people would not necessarily need cars or things like that to commute to work. So that's kind of how it started, but then it kind of snowballed a little bit, but then it kind of rolled back a little bit over the course of the year, because people were becoming more aware of it, and they're and they are a group that basically fought heavily. They had a very good plan as far as getting it through the committees in the legislature that they needed to. So then the covenants or the restrictions started coming in. So this was by no means what they wanted to do. This is kind of the watered down plan. So
Watered down is how I saw it described.
Yeah, they started off like, I would call it radical, but this is maybe the
aggressive.
Yeah, progressive, aggressive, progressive.
Oh, aggressively progressive.
Well,
So the worst case here is
like that.
Is that if the town does opt out, then we're basically playing the same hand we've been playing all along. But if this as of right is aligned with our strategy and is something that we would be advocating for as part of our plan, if it's going to show up in our recommendations, then
We should not,
then we need to make sure that's injected into the conversation. And
and this conversation would be the one where we get together with the, well, no, it would be a different one than the
it would
Mcculloch.
be, it's got a formal process in there. So it would be at zoning, at planning, at the Board of Selectmen. And we don't have a formal role in this. We're not in the regulatory path. We're not in the approval path for this. So we would have to assert our advisory capacity to do that.
I guess we have to decide if we want to, but obviously it isn't our decision. But
Right.
do we want to advocate? Do we want to advocate for the position? Because I found that, by the way, it says that the municipality is not stopped, or they aren't in derogation by prohibiting or limiting the use of accessory apartments for short-term rentals or vacation stays. So I'm taking, and they still have to fill applicable building code requirements. In other
Right.
words, you can't not have an electrical inspection or whatever is normally needed, nor can you, anything that's necessary for well or sewerage or things of that nature. So there are some things there, but I guess I'm looking at, this is certainly taking away from a local zoning board the right that they have to determine certain things about the nature of their zoning, which is the intention actually of the legislation, is to say, look, people are not going to do these things, that continue to set up restrictions that make it more and more difficult to have lower income housing, to have affordable housing in certain towns and places. This has been the history, and they're trying to pass this as one way of kind of putting a dent into that. So I could see why the zoning board might want to opt out, even on the basis of it just takes it out of local control. I don't know how free they've been to grant accessory dwelling.
Or how much traffic there's been in it, or what the application rate has been, which I don't expect has been. Karen,
Right.
I just feel like when listening to Bill talk, I think that I would expect that our zoning board to opt out, because we want to maintain control of our own zoning. And I can't imagine that they would behave in any other way.
So this is where the third branch of the possibility comes in. So if again, just hypothetically, if the principle of preserving home rule is one that they want to invoke, which would be understandable, as you said, Karen. But the ADU provision is something that could be good for the town in the right form and consistent with our strategy. That brings in the third of don't completely opt out, but replace it with something that's more tailored.
Right, I read that, but it seemed really complicated to me. I was like, what?
So basically, the three options are do nothing and accept the state override.
I can't imagine that anybody would go with that.
Completely opt out, which would revert to your current regulations, or replace it with something. So again,
well, haven't we all heard that there's an appetite to talk about ADUs?
Yes.
Right. So this could be actually a timely opportunity to instead of just, again, hypothetically, we don't have all the information we need, but if it works out that it's consistent with our strategy, it could be an opportunity based on this legislation to not completely opt out, but to replace it with something that's better than either what we have right now or the state rule.
So
Or we can completely opt out, and we can actually come up with our own town regulations that allow them.
Right. That's the third branch.
Yeah, that's probably what the town's going to do.
can't imagine anybody would adopt these, quite frankly. Why would we? I mean, you should tailor your zoning to your town, not to the state or federal level.
Yeah, Karen, there's a huge push for this. I mean, it's been ongoing for over a year, and this group is really well tight. So it's just a political mechanism of advocacy to get it through the legislature, and then town's got to deal with it. So I totally agree with you that this town, and many, and the majority of the 169 towns in Connecticut are going to opt out. And then we just see what happens to it after that. But it's in order to stimulate the discussion. There's that angle, right? So maybe if you opt out, but then you say, okay, well, we have to do something, and that's one of the sub intentions, to get these groups moving. But the majority of it was for the larger towns near transportation hubs.
So looking at it from the narrow perspective, or parochial perspective of affordable housing, it's an opportunity to get in the conversation about ADUs, our strategy, how ADUs fit in, and so even if the opt out eventually happens, if we can help influence the path of that, so that we can get changes that are consistent with our strategy, then that could be a good thing.
It's very similar to 830G, right? So nobody thinks that that's realistic for a town like ours, but yet it's stimulated this commission being formed, and then different committees and things like that. So even though it's 10 years old, but I think they're just trying to push that now and get more of the action going around the discussion, which here.
But I don't think that the 830G actually spurred a lot of conversation. It was the fear that we weren't going to get state funding. It was those kinds of things that prompted towns to say, okay, we need to get ahead of this. And then of course to keep developers out, or whatever everyone's intentions were. So I think just writing the papers didn't actually do anything. And I wonder once again what the purpose is. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of value for all this energy and time that went into this to end up where we are today.
Yeah, it's politics, and it's a nonprofit agency.
Yeah, at the end of the day, back to the 830 legislation, J is the mandate that's actually affecting us, where there is a state mandate to come up with a 5-year plan and refresh it every 5 years. That's a hard requirement. That's a compliance issue. So that's part of the reason we're here too. All right, we're not going to solve this all tonight, but thank you for digging into that morass of verbiage.
When do you think the zoning board will be discussing it?
It's going to be on their next.
It is on their next agenda. Okay.
Yeah. So continuing along that line, a way to move on this would basically be, even if we don't come in with an opinion or recommendation on opting out, is just to raise awareness in the discussion that the zoning board has, and the other boards and commissions that will need to take this up, that ADUs have a place in the strategy for affordable housing, and we see ADUs as part of the solution to provide better access to affordable housing for seniors and for single unit households, which are both of which demographic projections say are going to be increasing, and at least make sure that's part of the conversation that goes forward.
I think ADUs are good on many levels. As a homeowner wants to maybe supplement their income, there's no rents in this area. Affordable housing aside, just for many, many, many reasons, I don't know why we would exclude them.
So, we don't have a meeting between now and the next zoning meeting, which I think is February 7th.
Tuesdays.
Just look at I got the calendar up here. No, February 14th.
Veterans Day.
Yep. And then, oh, it is. They might not have it then. And then, so that's a busy week. So the 14th is zoning, 15th is our workshop, and 16th is our regular meeting.
Okay.
So maybe I can pile on to the special meeting we're going to hold to go through the content for the 15th, and maybe just have something in writing, something more concrete that we can talk about to inject into the discussion at the zoning commission.
Yep. Would you be presenting that in writing ahead of time to them, or just for background, or would you be in person at the meeting doing a
My
presentation?
sense is probably, we can talk about that, but my sense would be both.
Okay.
Send something in writing and at least show up and be available to discuss it at the.
They have some long discussions.
They do. They do. Hey, again, thanks. This is really a slog, and it's a brainer on how we go forward with this. But I think at another level, I think it's a good opportunity for us to fulfill part of our mission, which is to think about things, understand the implications for affordable housing, and put ourselves in a position to act in that advisory capacity.
Yeah, I'll take a look back at some of the stuff that I got from Desegregate, and see if, maybe we could connect the dots a little bit about how this ended up versus where they, what their sort of agenda is. I don't want to call them out on anything because they're trying to do good, but they're, just to see what the ramifications might be for some of the smaller towns, because there was a lot of smaller town representation during those meetings that showed up to, to voice their concerns.
Yep.
And so there's feedback from that.
Also, just one other thought. Lime had, before this came out, perhaps knowing it was coming, whatever, had made adjustments to their zoning regulations to be more relaxed for EDUs. Is that correct?
That's not my understanding, Bill. My understanding is that they worked within their existing framework, regulatory framework, but they put up a program to incentivize. I don't know. I can't remember exactly what the incentives were, to incentivize folks to create ADUs.
Yeah, I think it was a general survey, right? It wasn't actually, I don't even know, Karen, you might know better than I do about this, but I think they sent out a survey for sure to people who were potentially identified as having space for an ADU, but I'm not sure that ever came to fruition with tax incentives or anything.
I don't think there were any regulatory changes associated with that.
Okay.
Correct.
So again, on this, just to try and simplify it, if some of these provisions in 2129 are something that we would be recommending anyway, then before we do a blanket opt-out, let's at least make the town aware that this is a direction we're headed. And if it actually can present itself as an opportunity rather than a liability, then let's just make sure that's on the table as part of the conversation. There will be other opinions and other forces at work on it, but let's just make sure it's in there and that it's not, it contributes to the decision, whatever way it goes.
I think that's a great idea. I can take a run through on probably on Friday, Michael, and just sort of sync it up with some of the stuff from Desegregate, and then just send you some notes if you want.
Sounds good. I'll do the same on try to just I'll reread the the legislation and trying to intersect it with where we're heading on our strategy and just say, this is where, these are the areas that we'd be looking at anyway as part of our deliberations on the affordable housing plan.
I think we also should, from a perspective, if they want to keep the local sovereignty, which more than likely they will, we want to say ADUs are good. We'd like that to be on the radar, even if you opt out. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. And it could influence how they opt out.
Exactly.
Good point, John. Thank you.
Michael, I have to excuse myself because I got another Zoom at 7:30 and I've got to prepare.
Thank you, John.
Have a great night, everyone.
I think we're going to.
Thanks.
Very good. All right, it's 20 after 7. So the 2022 priorities, that is not a time critical item. I will entertain deferring that discussion to our next meeting, if you like. I mean, so our priorities we're working with so far are to create that plan, to get Mcculloch done, to come up with ARPA. So that hasn't changed. Our critical items haven't changed, and our time sensitive items haven't changed since last month. I think we do want to take a look going forward, particularly as we anticipate success with the 830J plan and move into a phase where we're going to implement that plan and not just prepare and adopt it. And also, some of the thoughts I was going to put out there were building up some of the other functions we had, the networking, the coordination function around affordable housing, the advisory capacity, which we're moving along as part of this 21-29 discussion. But there's nothing in here that we're going to need to make decisions on in the short term. So if you'd like to continue the discussion, I'm game. But if you'd like to defer this for now, and we don't have Amy and John with us anymore either. So thoughts?
I think we could put it off.
Great.
And then are we going to schedule that interim meeting though? You're going to
Yeah,
calendar invite?
I don't think we put it on there. That we need to kind of have a relaxed conversation about this. It's more blue sky.
Okay.
This next special meeting we're going to have 2 concrete items to deal with. So one is to review the content for February 15th. The other is to review some correspondence with zoning about 21-29.
Okay.
And then we may need either another special meeting or kind of one of those carve out meetings that we've done for more blue sky planning.
Yep.
And talk about it.
Okay.
Karen, thoughts?
I'm in agreement.
Okay. In that case, we will defer that agenda item. Switch screens here. So
You need
agenda item number 6, 2022 priorities, we will defer to a future meeting to be determined. Other business. I'm looking at my notes. I think we covered everything I had on my list. Anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Correspondence. I have none to report that we haven't already discussed. Anyone else?
Nothing for me.
Me either.
Okay.
Good.
Hearing none. Upcoming meetings and agenda items. We've talked about most of those. So we have a busy week. We have a busy time coming up. I will send out an email to try and find us over the next 10 days or so an opportunity to have that special meeting to review the content for the 15th and correspondence with the zoning commission or communication with the zoning commission on 21-29. The other meetings we've gone through, it's going to be pretty busy. We have the 24th for the River Cog Regional virtual meeting. Then the 15th for our first workshop. 16th zoning. And I'm sorry, 16th is our in February is our meeting. The 14th is potentially zoning. And I'll keep you posted if anything else comes up in the meantime.
All right, cool.
And the other one is the events article. That's not a meeting, but we'll work offline on that.
Okay. And then also just looking for if anybody knows any additional alternates that might be interested in joining or putting their application in.
Yes. Okay, so Jen, you're going to reach out to the events editor.
Yep.
For the timeline and process on getting that article done. We're going to go for the ARPA thing. We're going to do we're going to reach out to see if there's any low hanging fruit on that we can use as the basis for a proposal.
Yep, I'll check with them tomorrow.
Okay. Any other action items I miss? I can go back and look at the recording too. That's one nice thing about these meetings. Oh yeah, we're recording. Good. Were we not recording?
I've got my
Yeah, we're recording. Good.
my red lights on. Yeah.
No, I had an ambiguous indicator on my screen here, and I was getting nervous. But okay. Good. So we're good on agenda item 9. That brings us to public comment. I don't see, there might be one call-in user out there, but I will pause and open up for public comment. If anyone is online and wishes to do so, please identify yourself and try to hold it to a couple of minutes. Okay, hearing none, I will close public comment, which brings us to adjournment. Thanks, everybody. This was a productive meeting. We covered a lot of ground, even though we didn't get to the whole agenda. And I look forward to, I feel really good about where we're headed with the content for this meeting, and I'll look forward to getting that to you and having this conversation coming up at our special meeting. And again, thanks for the slog through 2129. I think it's important that we fulfill our duty on this one to understand legislation as it applies to affordable housing and act in that advisory capacity.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Jen?
I will second.
Karen? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody. The meeting is adjourned.
Thanks,
And,
George. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
everything.
Thank you,
Bye,
George.
George.
See
Don't
you
be a
soon.
stranger. Okay,
Good
bye-bye.
luck, George.
Good night, everybody.
Night.